Good morning. We've already formed a quorum. I now call the meeting to order. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes of meeting. The minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of October 2014 have already been distributed to you. The Secretariat has not received any proposal for amendment. Members, can I have your support for the confirmation of the minutes? No problem, right? Okay. Minutes confirmed. Item 2 on the agenda, information papers issued since the last regular meeting on the 23rd of June. After the last meeting, the Secretariat distributed 11 papers, the subject matter of which have already been listed in detail in the agenda. Any question? No. Next item, items for discussion at the next meeting. Our next regular meeting will be held on the 24th of November at 10:45 a.m. The administration agreed to discuss the following items. Subsidiary legislation proposals under the competition ordinance and the draft guidelines made under the competition ordinance. Members, do you agree that we put these two on our agenda next time? All right. Item 4 on the agenda, updates on the Kai Tak cruise terminal. We'll first invite the government officials to come in. I understand that they will use 10 minutes to first introduce to us the latest progress after the commissioning of the cruise terminal in mid-2013, including berthing, business development, and so forth. They will also mention their promotion work as well as work done in relation to tourism. I think we are all very familiar with the 3 government officials here, so I won't introduce them to you one by one. Philip, I understand that you will introduce to us the work in relation to Kai Tak Cruise Terminal KTCT since 2013. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. This is the first time we're attending the panel meeting in this legislative session. I hope we can keep in close cooperation with you in the coming year. I'll update you on the latest progress of KTCT. KTCT was commissioned in mid-2013. All along, by and large, it has been operating smoothly. There's room for improvement, and we've adopted improvement measures. We're confident in the future development of KTCT. I'll now invite our colleague, Mr. Lee, to do a PowerPoint presentation to update you on the latest situation. And then we're very willing to take questions from you and receive your comments. Mr. Lee. Mr. Chairman, I understand that you have a tight schedule, so I'll use a PowerPoint presentation to update you on the latest development of KTCT. A month ago, on the 29th of September, KTCT for the first time used simultaneously 2 berths for berthing cruise ships. On that day, we had Sapphire Princess and Voyage of the Seas berthing at the same time. On that day, around 5,600 cruise passengers disembarked. We relied on collaboration from the terminal operators, taxis, and other units, and by and large, we had a smooth operation. As for disembarkment time, within a reasonable time frame, passengers were able to take the mode of transport of their choice. For KTCT, after accumulating some experience, there are several aspects in relation to passengers. Free shuttle buses are arranged by the cruise operator to reach Kwun Tong, Wang Tai Sin, etc. And there are also charging feeder services, including routes to Tsim Sha Tsui tourist area and Hong Kong Island. And if some passengers would like to go to Hong Kong, there's also a dedicated feeder bus route to Hong Kong. bus terminus. So you can see that the feeder buses were welcomed by the passengers, and passengers can choose where to go. As for taxis, we understand that the location of KTCT as compared with Kwun Tong, Kowloon Bay, and the residential areas is rather far away. So unless taxi drivers know that they have passengers at KTCT, they won't be willing to go to KTCT with no passengers. So in terms of dissemination of traffic and transport information, that's very important. The terminal operator meets with taxi operators regularly. And one day before a cruise is to berth, taxi organizations would be informed in relation to berthing arrangements. And on that particular day, telephone calls would be made to call taxis in. On the 26th of September, the Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development also met with the organizations to see how we could facilitate more taxis to come into KTCT to serve the passengers. On the 29th of September, when 2 berths were used simultaneously, we saw improvement in terms of taxi parking and services. As for public transport, in September, October, the business area started to operate, and green minibuses and KMP had enhanced their services. Green minibuses had been operating from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. daily. As for Route 5 hour of KMP, Saturday services were added with enhanced frequency as well, and now they operate from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Now let's look at the berthing business. From June last year to now, KTCT had got 32 vessels berthing. Now is the end of October. For the whole year, for 2014, there will be 28 berthing trips. And next year, that will be increased to 55. That is a 100% increase. And we envisage the figure to rise. Many international cruise companies are seriously considering the Asian market. And in the next year, the global trend is that many new vessels would be commissioned, so we envisage a business growth. As for the terminal, our shops are all open now. At the moment, most shops are already open. On level 2 of the terminal building, we have a Chinese chain restaurant. Under that, we have a cafe restaurant and a Western restaurant. And we also have a retail brand shop with a cafe. For the retail shops, we have 3 shops. A wedding service company has rented 1. They're doing renovation and will be able to open shortly. As for the other shops, the cruise terminal will identify tenants. So that's the Chinese restaurant. This is the Western restaurant, and then the cafe restaurant, brand name retail shop, inside it, the cafe. And of course, these shops have resorted to various ways and means to attract the passengers. They set up small stores and distributed souvenirs, which would give them concessions when they patronize shops. Now, this is the exchange shop outside the terminal building. It has already been commissioned. As for the platform roof garden, it's 230,000 square feet in area. As this is now autumn, it's quite welcome. On Sundays and Saturdays, particularly Sundays, we have a lot of visitors. You see schools, picnics, local tour groups, etc. picnicking there. Well, the cruise terminal is quite big in area. sufficient signage is most important for the passengers. When the new business area was commissioned, we enhanced publicity and promotion, leading passengers to various locations like the retail area, the rooftop park, and the eateries. One of the characteristics of the cruise terminal is that there are days throughout the year that no vessels are berthing. So we would like to boost the usage rate on those days, thus making this terminal a special activity venue. Now here we got car shows. Well, the terminal looks like a terminal, but if you spend some effort on it, you can turn it into a vibrant venue, activity venue. We also have a marine book exhibition. On that day, many members of the public brought children there to this book exhibition on sea. And then in June this year, we got a World Skills Hong Kong competition. We used 2 waiting halls with different skills competitions, the youth skills competition, and it's open to the public. And upcoming at the end of October, we would have this Guangzhou, Hong Kong, Macau, Chengdu youth skills competition. Again, it's a youth skills competition. Now you can see promotion of electric car services. You can also see reception activities, exhibitions, banquets. All these are feasible. So much for my report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Members, any questions? Mr. Sin Chung Kai, Mr. James Chen, Mr. Kenneth Leung, Dr. Chung Lai Wan, and Mr. Yu Si Wing have signed up. And Dr. Elizabeth Quat, Mr. Andrew Leung. Anybody, any other members? Well, we should conclude this item at 11:50 a.m. If no more member signs up, I'll give each member 5 minutes. Just now when I spoke, I said that the cruise terminal was commissioned in 2003. In fact, it was commissioned in mid-2013. Mr. Sin Chung Kai? Mr. Chairman, I believe the Occupy Central movement has not affected the cruises. I think only very few people would occupy a cruise. As for this cruise terminal, I can see that next year more vessels will be berthing at the terminal. That's good. At the same time, I don't quite understand one point. Every day in our harbor, not a few gambling vessels have been berthing in the harbor, but not at the cruise terminal. So, Commissioner, any solution? How can we attract them to use the cruise terminal?
Of course, we do not have the power to compel them to berth at the terminal, but would there be any incentives for us to do that so that we can, so that the terminal could be, utilized more efficiently? Thank you, Mr. Sin. I think as far as the terminal is concerned, we're talking about the positioning of the KTCT. Regarding the casino vessels, I'm sure they have their own commercial considerations. These casino vessels, I understand that every evening, after the customers are boarded, they will move out, sail out to the open sea, where they will provide different types of gambling activities, and then they will come back to the harbor the following morning. In this regard, I think according to the business considerations, they do not need to berth at any of our piers. For the KTCT, of course, it is positioned to attract the traditional type of cruise vessels, which have fixed itineraries, instead of vessels which will only berth overnight. So I think that is the major purpose of the cruise vessel business. In 2015, the number of cruise vessels to be berthed at the KTCT will increase, will be double. The Caribbean Cruise Company has announced that from July to October next year they will home port in Hong Kong, and there will be more than 20 vessels starting out from Hong Kong. And this shows that the international cruise operators are now having more and more confidence in our terminal. In 2014, the total number of vessels berthed in Hong Kong, including the ocean terminal and the KTCT, has already gone up by 40% compared with the figure last year. Yes, I understand it's a question of positioning. So is it the case that the cruise terminal operator has not really, approached these casino vessel operators, or is it that they don't find it attractive to berth there, or what? So what is the exact reason? We see that the terminal, while we have seen a doubling of the number of vessels berthed at the terminals, but still very often they're not being used at all. So is it a good thing to attract these casino vessels to berth there? As I said, this could be due to the business considerations of the operators of these vessels. One of the reasons is that if they were to berth at Ocean Terminal and the KTCT, they will have to pay the berthing fee, and that would be part of the operating cost for these vessels. Given the cost considerations, the different operators may have their own considerations. Coming back to the KTCT, while the operator tries to attract more vessels, cruise vessels to berth at the terminal, they have actually done a lot of promotion with the cruise operators, but I think the most important thing now is that we need to build a solid foundation for the terminal. And I think the target now would be the traditional cruise terminals. For the other types of vessels, I think their operators will have to consider carefully before and they'll have to, really decide, clearly what is their objective. Mr. James T. Philip, of course you would remember that the original design of the cruise terminal, while I was the chairman of the Hong Kong Tourism Board, I was a party to the negotiation with the government. But now, according to what you've told us today, it would appear that it is not operating according to the original design or concept. Originally, we wanted to attract more cruise vessels and tourists coming to Hong Kong, and that there will be more shipping companies or cruise operators, and there would be better linkage. And it's not like what you're telling us this morning, that you're operating Chinese restaurants, cafe restaurants, or even staging book shows there. These are it will show that the terminal is not doing a good business, and that's why you've shifted focus, and the terminal is now, catering to the local people instead. Well, that can't be helped, but I'm particularly interested in slide number 8. You say the terminal was built in 2013, and there were only 28 vessels berthed in 2013 and 40 odd in 2014. By the number of berths, we're talking about these vessels which berth only for one day. So 53 divided by 55 days divided by 3. We're talking about only 20 odd days where the vessels are other than that, the place will be, vacant, and there wouldn't be any business for those operating the ancillary facilities there. Even for the if you have so many people, working there, I mean, it's not viable. So perhaps Philip can answer my question, and that is by 2015 there will only be 55 vessels to be berthed there? Is it because that in the past these cruise vessels would pass through Hong Kong? In the Mediterranean area or in Europe, the terminal will have vessels berthed at the terminals almost every day. So is it the case that in Hong Kong the cruise vessels cannot load or pick up passengers in the neighboring regions, and that is why our terminal is so poorly patronized? And in that case, when would the facilities in the region be further improved so that we can actually match up with the business volume in the Mediterranean area? Thank you. There are two aspects to this question. It is true that there were 55 vessels coming at the terminal. Sometimes the vessel will come in the morning and leave in the evening. Sometimes they will stay overnight and leave the following morning. And so far, after we've opened the two berths, we're able to make available these two berths. Regarding frequency or the number of berthings, we will fight for as many berthings as possible. That would depend on the promotion by the cruise operators and also how we promote tourism for Hong Kong in general. We have actually talked to the ports in the neighboring regions such as Taiwan and other Asian countries. We have a collaboration plan called the Asian Cruise Alliance. We want to form an alliance with the neighboring ports and provide financial incentives for the cruise terminal operators so that they can deploy more cruise vessels to the Asian area. And with such joint effort, I believe there will be more and more cruise vessels berthing in Hong Kong. Regarding the ancillary facilities, when we promote the terminal, we have said that the terminal provides diversified facilities where no vessels are berthed there, and in order to make more optimal use of the terminal, we will organize more. Philip, I don't think there's too much time. Could you tell us? Answer the question. We have the capacity. And how small is the scale of the business in Taiwan and Hainan Island? If they can never match with Hong Kong, then it will never be able to catch up. Our facilities actually can measure up to any of the ports in Asia, and we have a very good foundation for collaboration with the other Asian ports. Mr. Lam Kai-Chiang. Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'd like to follow up on Ms. James Teen's questions. First of all, in the PowerPoint presentation, you showed us the leasing conditions of the cruise terminal. Could you tell me what exactly is the long-term positioning of the terminal? Is it going to be a basic transport facility, or is it going to be like the ocean terminal, which is an composite or comprehensive commercial facility? If it is the latter, then for the commercial operators in any shopping mall, they would provide facilities like Chinese restaurants, Hong Kong-style restaurants. There's nothing unique at all in these facilities. Do you intend to make this terminal turn this into an ordinary shopping center without any unique characteristics? Have you considered, for example, the Zhongshan cultural area in Taiwan, where they would promote the work of local artists or the local brands of Taiwan, which are really unique in design? So whether we're talking about artistic creation or unique decoration and brands of local artists. So do you have a specific plan for the portfolio of tenants to operate there? And secondly, the question about the environment. You may not have been ready to answer yet, but if so, please give me a written answer. And also about the transport facilities like taxis and tourist coaches. It would appear that you have not considered having a long-term plan. That is, would you consider deploying electric transport vehicles so that the tourists coming to Hong Kong will have to, for these tourists, the first impression to get is Hong Kong is a very environmentally friendly city. Philip. Two questions regarding the positioning of the terminal. The KTCT is striving hard to become one of the major cruise hubs in Hong Kong. So it's going to play a very important role. What we want to do is that whether as a terminal we should provide good facilities, and that it should be also a good tourist spot. So the podium's garden, which show you just now, has proven to be very popular with Hong Kong residents and tourists. The facilities we talk about, be they Chinese restaurants or retail outlets, other than Hong Kong residents, whenever vessels are berthed there, we will be able to serve the tourists. So we will continue to work hard in this area. Members asked whether there are other overseas examples that we can make reference of. For example, showcasing artistic products and so on. And of course, the operator, when it operates the terminal, it would have its own business strategies. But if we talk about more innovative, such innovative ideas, we will not rule them out. And at the appropriate time, I'm sure the operator will review his own strategy. The most important thing is whether the operator can come up with a theme, a major theme for the cruise terminal. I'm not talking about what facilities are available at the terminal. Would it possible for you to negotiate with the terminal operator and make it one of the factors, prerequisites to decide whether you will allow the operator to manage the terminal? You must make it a prerequisite. The commercial area is about 5,600 square meters, so there is a physical constraint there. When the high-tech development area is developed to a more mature stage, I'm sure the overall impact, for example, whether we can attract unique brands moving the terminal, we can certainly consider that. But at the initial stage of operation, our focus is to provide the most basic facilities. In future, as to how we can further diversify the brand and make it more unique, we will certainly consider that going forward. On the question about the environment, the Environmental Bureau has entrusted the EMSD to conduct a feasibility study about the possibility of providing power at the terminal. Based on the outcome of the study, we will work out the way forward. We do attach a lot of importance to this, other than the terminal, which need to be efficient in receiving these inbound tourists. We will certainly. What about the question about transport? Several members have just joined us, and they've also put up their hands. So I'm going to draw a line here. We have Mr. Lam Tai Fai, Mr. Michael Teen, Mr. Yik Chi Ming, and Mr. Paul Shea. I'm going to draw a line there. So next, Dr. N. Jiang. Regarding construction cost of the ocean terminal, I don't know what the final amount will be. The initial funding was 5.8 billion. Together with the land premium, certainly it's going to exceed 10 billion. The project is an expensive one, but never mind, because we want to develop the economy and boost our GDP, and we obviously need to make investments at the initial stage.
Of course, now the annual expenditure is more than $200 million. Now we don't even know whether we can balance our books. It doesn't matter, Chairman. The most important point is, in future, how are we going to become Asia's cruise hub? What's our ranking at the moment? It doesn't matter if we are the last now. Just tell us. Then we'll be able to see when we're going to become second last, third last, etc. You don't need to give me an answer now. If you have the figures, give me the figures. Otherwise, you can hand over the figures or texts to the Secretariat. Mr. Chairman, apart from this request, I'd like the Secretariat to pay more attention to the following. Concerning cruise ships, you all know that I had been protesting on a cruise ship. I was not occupying the ship. I later discovered a lot about our cruise ships. The mainland has relaxed its policies by allowing many mainland visitors to disembark in Hong Kong. If you have business, the cruise ships will come. In Hong Kong, we only have a population of a few million people. If Hong Kong can become a transfer port, then it will be helpful in developing us into a cruise hub. You see, some people embarked happily but disembarked sorrowfully. So can we have very clear cruise guidelines about the conditions on cruise ships? Don't be timid. Well, don't say they're an Italian cruise line and then we're handside. Frankly speaking, I've been joining cruises for many years. I discover that each cruise line had clear explanation about changes. The captain and the crew on board would clearly explain things to you. I discovered that for some cruise ships, it's just like the one I boarded last time for Costa, the Italian cruise line. The meals provided, the food provided was the worst I've ever experienced. And the attitude of the captain was never experienced by me before. So how should we enhance our monitoring of these cruise ships? What if something happens? Dr. Chang Lai-wan, I think you'd better leave some time for Philip to answer your questions. Well, Philip, just answer one question. Are there guidelines and codes for cruise ships? Is there room for improvement, and when will improvements be made? Mr. Chairman, service is very important insofar as the cruise industry is concerned. We did mention that in our liaison with the tourism board. We explained to them the market of Hong Kong, the sources of passengers, in particular for mainland passengers, what their characteristics are, such that cruise lines understand more the market of Hong Kong. But this communication is in a due direction to the cruise lines. Hong Kong is a new market. Mr. Chairman, when are they going to make improvement? Where are the guidelines and codes? Well, Philip, would you please answer Dr. Chang Lai-wan's question directly? Any code, any guidelines? Dr. Chang Lai-wan did receive unhappy treatment on one of the cruise trips. She would like to be a happy passenger in future. Her opinion is actually very good. Guidelines or those suggestions from Dr. Chang Lai-wan, if you don't have them now, would you please go back and prepare some? You should have clear codes and guidelines for cruise lines as well as cruise passengers. Even if we are to die, we must be convinced. Well, Mr. Chairman, the background, etc. of each and every cruise line is not the same. Mr. Chairman, they have to come back and tell us something about our ranking. Are we the last? Any room for upgrading? Mr. Yu Siwing, Mr. Chairman, the cruise terminal has been operating for over a year. For the connecting traffic and transport arrangements and other aspects, there have been improvements. But for an international cruise terminal, in terms of scale and facilities, we're still short of what an international cruise terminal should provide. I hope they won't stop here. They should conduct a review. And one of the aspects to be reviewed is the source of passengers. I don't know whether they've conducted any analysis on the details, including the mainland market and the overseas market. I think these information should provide inspiration for the future development of our cruise terminal. And what will the government do in terms of analyses? You mentioned 50-odd cruise trips. That's not enough. So there must be an analysis. You must set objectives. In the region, many cruise terminals have been commissioned, including that in Shanghai and Tianjin, and in Singapore, in Vietnam, as well as Hainan Island. There are also cruise terminals. So what's the positioning of our cruise terminal? I'd like to listen to the views of the government in these aspects. Philip? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for members' questions. For objectives and positioning, as I said, Hong Kong would definitely want to become a cruise hub. Why did we construct the KTCT? That's, of course, one of the major objectives. We'll definitely continue to work hard. We've absorbed experience in the past 1.5 years for these 30-odd cruise ships. So we have absorbed experience. We will have to enhance publicity and promotion to attract more cruise ships to Hong Kong. KTCT was commissioned in the middle of last year. Foreign visitors will have one more choice to come to Hong Kong. And the interest of foreign visitors to Hong Kong has grown. We noted that the number of cruise passengers received by us has been growing in proportion. So for the local tourism industry, be it local residents or passengers from other jurisdictions, this terminal will be a new attraction. If necessary, we can adjust our publicity and promotion strategies such that our cruise terminal can play its potential to the full. Mr. Yu, Mr. Chairman, the terminal has been operating for over a year. They don't have detailed figures for the terminal. I want to have detailed figures on the passengers from Hong Kong, the mainland, and other jurisdictions. The tourism industry, the government, and the terminal operator would like to know what to do. We would like the terminal to become the most influential and biggest cruise terminal in the region. Philip, I'll provide the details to the panel. Next, Dr. Elizabeth Kwok. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the issues of positioning and objectives. I've always heard that as far as positioning is concerned, we should become a hub, a cruise hub. But when will we become one of the Asian cruise hubs? Do we have objectives when compared with other jurisdictions? How many cruise ships or cruise passengers are we aiming at? Is there any estimation on the figures to be attained in order to become a cruise hub? If they can't provide an answer today, they should give us a written reply after the meeting. They cannot just give us one word for our objective. That is hub. What's meant by hub? After listening for so long, I don't see what's meant by a hub. As for shore power, I have not heard any reply just now. I'd like to have an answer in a moment. As for this $20 tunnel coupon for taxis, I would like to know whether it will be a long-term measure because it has been effective. As for sea transport, would you consider, for example, water taxis, so to speak? Because the jurisdictions also have water taxis and other modes of transport that will also help boost the tourism industry. So I'd like to know the latest progress of the study. Philip, concerning shore power, I'd like to defer to Ms. Law in a moment. As for positioning, we would like to become a major cruise hub. As to the annual targets in relation to the number of cruise trips or number of passengers, well, I think you need to give us a timetable. I think Dr. Elizabeth Kwok would like to know your objectives. If you have set objectives, have you met them already? If not, when? And do you have a preliminary timetable? And Mr. Chairman, what's the definition for hub? When compared with other cities, when will become a hub? We cannot just have one word hub. We have to know what a hub is. Philip? Mr. Chairman, for hard figures and definitions, it's very difficult to give an answer today. The cruise terminal is still in its initial stage of commissioning, is trying to establish itself, is trying to establish its reputation. In future, how many tourists are we going to attract, etc., etc.? At this stage, we don't have hard and fast objectives for follow-up. As for ancillary transport arrangements, on the 29th of September, 2 cruise ships berthed at the same time. We did offer a $20 tunnel coupon to each taxi that came in to the cruise terminal. In future, when cruise ships are to berth again, we'll examine whether that measure should be implemented again. Every time we kept in close liaison with the taxi organizations, we would like to make the best transport arrangement. As regards taxis on sea or water taxis, now, when a cruise ship berths at the terminal, we would like to see whether a pontoon can be provided. When a cruise ship is berthing, that pontoon can provide connecting ferry services to the passengers. We're now exploring the feasibility of the suggestion with the cruise terminal operator and relevant departments. We'll try our very best. We would like to solve the problem as far as possible. We'll try our very best, such that when cruise passengers arrive, they have one additional mode of transport to choose. And that can also be a way of sightseeing in Hong Kong. Mr. Chairman, concerning objectives, I'm very worried. I don't understand at all. I cannot accept that the objective of this cruise terminal is to make Hong Kong a cruise hub, and there's no definition for the word hub. But I think the government should go back and study objectives, figures, and definitions and give us answers later. So, Philip, would you please go back and look into Dr. Elizabeth Kwok's comments and questions, and please supply us with supplementary information. Thank you.
Mr. Leung, I think Dr. Kwok's suggestion of operating water taxis, especially on days when the cruise terminals arrive, is very important. Because if we are able to attract large vessels, we're talking about easily 2,000 to 3,000 tourists. If we do not provide, multiple transport facilities, there will be overcrowding. In Europe, of course, the cruise terminals will charter their own buses or coaches taking the tourists to different areas. If you have several thousand tourists arriving, you will need many taxis. I think the government should really consider providing, sea transport. Hong Kong as a hub. If Hong Kong were to become a hub, and when we have more and more, cruise terminals in the neighboring areas, it's a good thing because it can create synergies. The biggest problem is that as a cruise terminal, you would like the cruise vessels to go around the different terminals in Asia and then come back again. But unfortunately, the tourism policy in China is that once the tourists leave, they cannot come back through the same area. So if we could, link up with Xiamen, Keelung, and then going to Shanghai and Tianjin, and then linking up with Korea, Japan, and coming back to Hong Kong again, if we could have a cruise terminal that will berth at one terminal every day, I think that would be something which Philip can discuss with the tourism ministry in the mainland. Thank you. Mr. Leung is correct. Cruise tourism is not a zero-sum game. The more terminals the cruise berth, the more tourists they can attract. So in promoting cruise terminal, we would like our terminal would certainly collaborate with the other cruise terminals. The central government actually has an open policy, and they've announced the details last year. That is, when mainland tourists arrive in Hong Kong, once they board the vessel after they've gone to Taiwan, previously they'll have to come back to Hong Kong. But with the relaxed policy announced by the mainland, when mainland tourists come to Hong Kong and then board a vessel to Taiwan, they can go on to Korea and Japan before they go back to the mainland. Such opening measures have already been announced and are now being implemented, and that certainly would be an incentive and to encourage more mainland tourists to join cruise tours in Hong Kong. And it has also given us more flexibility. I'm sure such relaxed measures will certainly help the development of our cruise tourism. And if there's a need to further amend or adjust policies, we'll certainly maintain close contact and liaison with the National Tourism Commission. I think you understand that when visitors from the mainland come to Hong Kong, they then go on to Taiwan and Japan, and then they're going back to Korea, and then back to Tianjin and Shanghai. They will, disembark in Shanghai. What happened if the ship were to come from Shanghai to Hong Kong? You will not be able to have business for the entire loop. I think when the tourists board the vessel in Hong Kong, even if they go through Tianjin, Shanghai, they should still be allowed to come back to Hong Kong so that they can complete the whole loop before they go back to China, and that would be more efficient. Chairman, I think we've also explored this direction, and if need be, we will talk to the relevant authorities in the mainland. That's after the tourists have gone to Taiwan, Japan, and Korea, we'll consider whether we can allow them to come back to Hong Kong or go to the other ports in the mainland, so that in the entire network, that our terminal will achieve the maximum economic efficiencies. And this is something that we're exploring, and if need be, we will further liaise with the mainland authorities about this. Mr. Leung is not saying that you should only do it when there's a need. He is pointing out that we should already do this now, because there is now this demand from tourists, but they simply cannot do it at the moment. We'll certainly try to explore this possibility with our mainland counterparts. Mr. Lam Tai Fai, thank you. It's not easy to develop a cruise terminal because this is a new business, And in order to become the hub for cruise travel in Asia is not easy either. You need many prerequisites, you need the hardwares and the softwares, and also the business will be affected by business cycles and the political environment, and even the social stability of the place will affect the incentive of visitors coming to Hong Kong. So there are many uncertain factors. I understand that at the initial stage or at the inception stage, certainly the cruise terminal would face many difficulties. The government has already, built the terminal, so we cannot retract. We have to go forward. At the initial stage, and Philip told us that there are diversified facilities at the terminal, and when there are not that many vessels coming, we should make optimal use of these facilities instead of putting them to waste. But just remember that the core business of the terminal is cruise travel. So do not deviate from this major focus and turn it into a catering and exhibit center like the Hong Kong Coliseum. It has nothing to do with sports anymore. So I think the cruise terminal should really be a genuine cruise terminal rather than a center, a catering or an exhibition center. Many people ask you about the objective, how you can attract more vessels, the cruise vessels to come. Of course, we can do it, you may say you can do it step by step, but I don't think for this type of business you need to expedite your pace. And you've not answered Dr. Quat's question regarding what is your target and what do you mean by a hub and how we define a hub. You dare not give an answer now, because if you give us an answer, you will build up expectations that you may not be able to satisfy. But I think you know the answer in your mind. In the PowerPoint, you only talk about 2015, there will be 55 vessels. We all know that is not enough. We may put up with a small number of vessels coming for the next 2 years, but you must have an interim target for the next 5 or 10 years. There must be some projection. If you don't give us the figures now, eventually you will have to give us the figures. I don't want you to give us the figures now, otherwise you may not be able to deliver in the future. Why don't you tell us how you intend, or what strategies or tactics do you have to attract more cruise terminals coming to Hong Kong? Tell us about your tactics rather than simply telling us that you do your best. Philip, I think the member has raised the question about the challenges we face at the initial stage. I fully agree with that. The cruise vessel, the cruise business will be the core business of the terminal. The non-cruise, the activities not related to cruise business will be ancillary. The core business will be to try to attract more cruise vessels to berth at Hong Kong. Regarding the target, I've talked about this many times. We will try to increase the frequency of vessels berthing in Hong Kong. First of all, we need to try to explore more markets because more and more people are interested to come to Hong Kong by cruise term vessels, especially those from southern China. It's very convenient to them, and they're also interested in traveling to the neighboring regions. Southeast Asia, Taiwan, and India. I think the Hong Kong Tourism Board has done a lot of promotion there. And secondly, we need to enhance Hong Kong's image as a hub for cruise travel. We need to do more international promotion. In November, we're going to stage a cruise travel conference in November in Hong Kong, which will help promote the terminal facilities in Hong Kong among the cruise operators. And secondly, we will be also collaborating with the neighboring ports, and we'll be providing incentives to the cruise operators so that we can encourage them to deploy more vessels to come to Hong Kong. Some cruise operators are now building new vessels and new ships, which will be completed in the next year or two, and will be launched, and they have plans to deploy these vessels to Hong Kong and use Hong Kong as the home port. But they're still at the preparatory stage, and I'm afraid I will not be able to give you too much details now. But all these show that the cruise operators have confidence and have interest in our cruise terminal, and it shows that the number of vessels coming will increase going forward. Mr. Chi Ming, thank you. The Commissioner has already answered part of my questions. That is, whether or not there are any cruise operators who intend to use Hong Kong as a home port. Hong Kong is a well-known port of call in Asia, but we must have some operators who are willing to use Hong Kong as the home port before we can have more patronage. You don't need to give us any names. My question simply is that, are there any such operators with such an interest? And how do you intend to promote among these companies in this regard? And secondly, we had once suggested that how can we help to improve the patronage of the cruise terminal? We've suggested that at the tip of the runway, which is now planned to be a park, we can build a pier there, and you can do a bit of setting back there. You can even place a pontoon there. I understand that the operator running the route from Kwun Tong to North Point is willing to add a new pier there. So perhaps you can take that into consideration. And also people who operate sea launches, very often they will the passengers will board and unboard in Hong Ham, causing a lot of overcrowding and congestion there. So if you could provide for a berth in Kai Tak, they can pick up and unload the passengers there as well, so that whether it's local tourists or overseas tourists, they can board vessels to have a tour of the Victoria Harbour and also visit our cruise terminal and patronize the restaurants and retail outlets there as well. So what is the progress? Thank you. I've already reported to members that together with the operator and the departments, we are exploring the possibility of adding a floating pontoon when there are cruise vessels to be berthed at the terminal, so that we can provide another additional option for tourists to tour Hong Kong. We want to do this first, and if this could be done, well, you're talking about two things here. First of all, when the cruise vessel arrive, how can we, for example, allow them to go to other areas like Tsim Sha Tsui and so on quickly? I wasn't talking about this, but rather before the KTCT is being fully utilized at the moment, how can we increase the patronage at the moment? How can you step up the patronage? If this could be done, we will certainly explore further the question of marine transport. So other than fighting for more cruise vessels to berth in Hong Kong, on days when no vessels are berthed there, we will organize other activities. We've already explained to you, for example, skills competition for young people, car shows, or even have receptions and banquets there. So this certainly will help improve the overall patronage of the cruise terminal. Regarding promotion among the cruise operators, the terminal has been commissioned for a year and a half already, and we already have vessels using our terminal as a de facto home port. Over the last year, other than the Kai Tak cruise terminal, let us not forget that when talking about the cruise industry, we should also not forget the ocean terminal. And there are now new vessels using the ocean terminal as their home port. So overall speaking, the pie has become larger, the number of vessels berthed in Hong Kong has increased drastically in the last few years, and we hope that this trend will continue in the next few years. Mr. Michael T. Beg pardon. Let me, finish with my. Let me swallow this first. From since the days of Donald Young to Mr. C.Y. Leung, we have migrated from a policy of active non-intervention to active intervention in terms of livelihood issues. As far as economic development is concerned, I don't quite understand whether or not C.Y. Leung is still, following a policy of active non-intervention, or is he, adopting a more interventionist approach? When people ask whether you have a target, you've not been able to give us an answer.
The merit of positive intervention is that you spend your money and leave it to destiny. That is positive non-intervention. If you want to use public money well, you have to have objectives. But then you don't know how to set objectives. Let me share with you this. U.S. magazines describe Hong Kong's cruise terminal as the Rolls-Royce of the Rolls-Royces. And now with this Rolls-Royce, nobody is riding on it because an extra 20 kilometers will have to be run by passengers. I went to Singapore. They only have a bench, also 20 kilometers. But by the second year, they got 140 cruise ships berthing. Well, also 2 years. Well, let's take it to be a car running 20 kilometers. They got 140 berthing ships. But now you're looking at 55 within 2 years. I don't know whether Hong Kong has done what Singapore had done. You've bought a car. You must have passengers. Well, your Rolls-Royce is 2 to 3 folds more expensive. I really don't know, but there must be reasons. You have received 15,000 passengers, and every year they have 150,000. Well, Singapore has a lot of tourist attractions. So has Hong Kong. Many good tourist attractions. In Singapore, what attractions do you have? So that's worthy of your deliberation. In future, would you like to benchmark Singapore? The modes of economy in terms of passengers and cruises were similar. We have a lot of neighboring cities that are worth visiting. Just go and learn something from them. Well, you are grasping indicators and try to compete with them. Why not make them a major rival? They major in Southeast Asia. We major in Northeast. They got 140. Why can't we also have 140? You must proactively find passengers. Of course, we don't know what to do. Otherwise, we will all be the tourism commissioner. Lastly, I'd like to share with you one point about their success. That is how they let passengers go to different destinations. We're in traffic and transport. Last time, they got 2,400 passengers disembarking, 30% bus and 70% taxi. I mean the way of leaving. And they did some tracking. The longest waiting time was 30 minutes. As for the remaining passengers, 15 to 30 minutes. Their plan is that within the next year, they'll cut it to 15 minutes. I asked them, are you playing magic? Will the taxis come immediately upon your call? Oh, they say yes. Before cruise ship berths, they talk to the taxi operators, cruise terminal operator, etc. Well, can you leave some time for their answers? Oh, they only need to answer yes or no. They should talk to taxi operators in receiving each and every cruise ship. So what sort of liaison work had been done with taxi operators or associations? If you don't have ancillary services, that won't work. At least you should start with traffic and transport. Are you interested in visiting Singapore to look at their hard benchmarks? Commissioner, would you please respond to those viewpoints? Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank members for their opinion, which would be seriously considered by us. We examined other jurisdictions, including Singapore and other Southeast Asian jurisdictions. We'll absorb what's relevant to us. So for Hong Kong, we have to examine what reference can we take from them. In any case, we would like to attract more passengers to Hong Kong. The background of this cruise terminal is that back then, many cruise ships, particularly the big ones, had to berth at Kwai Chung Terminal, container terminal, or just on sea. So for increasing the number of passengers, we said that one of the initiatives is to attract mainland visitors. Cruise is a new mode of tourism for mainland visitors. Besides, we would enhance our collaboration with Asian ports. There will definitely be competition because we would like to retain our market shares. But then while competing, there's also room for collaboration for cruise operators. The more terminals they can berth, the more they're interested. Concerning Mr. Tian's questions, if you promise to take reference from his comments, that will suffice. Yes, we're willing to do so. Mr. Porter, just now, Mr. Michael Tan cited the example of Singapore. Singapore has developed its cruise terminal area for many years. Look at the figures. For 2014, 137 ship calls, KTCT plus ocean terminal. So that's similar to the 140 of Singapore. So that can allay some doubts. So the number of calls has been low. Even with activities in 2013, we got 10 and 2014, 11. A very small number. So we cannot just let the terminal rely on the number of ship calls. Otherwise, the operators won't be able to survive. The eateries and the retail shops can't survive. So we have to boost the use of the terminal by locals. We should have more activities. It's just like the ocean terminal. Canton Road was originally quite dark, and now it has become the busiest tourist areas. Well, in history, the bars and night shops played a very important role. So I think the government should consider linking the bar concept with the cruise terminal while not affecting the residents in the area. That may become another Lan Kwai Fong. I understand that Wine and Fest would be held there. So in a moment, the Commissioner can respond and tell us the latest progress. As for the ships, as Mr. Frankie Yik said, the ships could berth there temporarily. Lei King, Wan and Kwun Tong vessels can stop there before going to Kwun Tong. Today, we don't have officials from the Transport Department. That's about the pontoon. Well, soonest by 2016, we'll be getting the MTR or the light rail. So, without the pontoon, we can't link the terminal with densely populated Kwun Tong. So we should hugely boost local use of the terminal. A pontoon can serve as a walkway for people. In the next 1 or 2 decades, with pontoons, will allow more locals to use the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal. Number 3, very quickly, concerning paragraph 7 of the paper, should be paragraph 15, in relation to subsidiary legislation. Is my understanding correct? At the moment, we rely on old laws. We don't have new subsidiary legislation. That's not desirable to the neighboring areas. And new laws have to be drafted. Does that indicate that preparation has not been comprehensive enough? Because the terminal has been commissioned for 2 years, still we don't have any subsidiary legislation. So there may be law and order problems as well as other major problems. Philip, there are 3 questions. Any measure that can boost the use of the cruise terminal by cruise ships or non-cruise ships, we are willing to consider. Recently, we received this Bar Street proposal. We also met with the proponent. But there are problems to be solved before we know whether or not the idea is feasible. For example, will the open space of the terminal be reduced? What about the shops? What about environment, law and order situation, the reaction of the district councils concerned, and so forth? We have to handle those issues first before we know the Bar Street concept is feasible. As for boosting the usage rate of the terminal, we're willing to consider all suggestions. At the moment, ferry services are provided when there are ship calls. In future, will ferry services be expanded such that they become a routine and day-to-day mode of transport? I think it's premature to take that approach. At the moment, we'll make ferries providing connecting services first before we proceed further. As for the 3rd point, I believe the cruise terminal will do technical assessment first. At the moment, we cannot say whether pontoons are feasible. As for legislation, for KTCT, at the moment, we have a port security plan. Every time when a ship calls, we rely on this mechanism to handle law and order matters and security matters. The terminal has operated for more than a year. We've absorbed relevant experience. We know that we need to legislate on security measures. We have to study the area of the security zone and so forth. That does not mean that we did not study that aspect in detail. It's just that it is more perfect to prepare the law after we have absorbed some experience. So when the law is ready, we'll come to LegCo to offer further explanation. Philip, for any successful cruise terminal, it will always have days and slots where there are no ships berthing. A cruise terminal will never be used fully. That means for every time slot. So any cruise terminal will have to rely on locals to support their retail businesses and so forth, eateries and so forth. Well, Mr. Paul there mentioned local ferry services. If they can be regularized, that will help boost the business in the terminal. So if ferry companies are only to provide connecting services during ship calls, ferry companies may not be willing to provide the service. Say if you get 10 odd cases every month, they may not be willing to do it. And for publicity and promotion and traffic and transport, at the moment, many people don't know what's in the terminal. For example, the roof pack It's actually very beautiful. The scenery there is very good. Some people asked whether bars and restaurants could be provided there. I understand that due to security concerns, some suggestions won't be feasible, while others can be considered. I believe you should do more publicity. As for traffic and transport, as many members mentioned, at the moment, it's very inconvenient to get to the terminal. No regular bus routes, and even for minibuses and taxis, there are problems. You only have 120 parking spaces. Many people complain to me that is very confusing that drivers have to go round and round before they can actually enter the terminal area. And sometimes you have to try your luck. And even if you're able to enter the terminal area, the parking spaces may be full, and some of the people don't actually need to spend money in eateries and shops. The rooftop park is very comfortable to enjoy. So for the ferry services for the cruise terminal, can you have more regular services? Can you talk to the operators? The signage is very confusing. Sometimes several places are placed on the same signage board, so it's very confusing. Many people also told me that the signage was very poor. Taxi services, parking spaces, etc. How are you going to improve them?
The Chairman, indeed it is true that that is true, and in future we'll continue to improve on the situation. The Chairman made several points regarding public ferry. As I said, we would first want to wait until we will arrange for ferry services when there are berthings at the terminal, and if that proves to be successful, then we will only at the next step consider whether or not we would work with the other departments to expand the ferry service and make it a routine ferry service. I think this is something that we can explore at the next stage. Regarding road signage, whether or not it's the roads going to the terminal and also the signage for the various facilities within the terminal, we have heard members' views, and over the last few months, improvement measures have been made, and it is now more convenient for visitors. If there is a need to further improve on the signage, we will certainly work with the other departments to see where we can do better. On promotion, whether it's promotion on our part or the promotion with the cruise operators, we certainly step up the effort going forward. Next month, we're going to stage the Asia Pacific Cruise Tourism Conference, and will be a very good platform for us to promote the KTCT, and we will certainly step up the promotion. If I may now sum up. Members have given us have put forward very valuable suggestions, but very often it boils down to a question of whether we have the egg or the chicken first. The Commission said that he will, explore what needed to be done going forward. But sometimes I think we could be bolder. We can adopt a two-pronged approach. If you want to wait until you assess the results achieved before you do anything further, that may not be too satisfactory. We all want the terminal to be successful, and we hope that we'll be able to attract more cruise vessels coming to Hong Kong as soon as possible, and that we can attract more visitors coming to Hong Kong to spend the money. So if you could, do take on board all these suggestions at the same time, including liaison with the authorities in the mainland. For example, what the one country, one stop issue has now been resolved. So, and also the question of how we define ourselves as a hub and whether we have a timetable. I understand that when you have a brand new cruise terminal, you need the cooperation with the cruise operators, and the operators on their part may have certain requests, and we may also need to work with the other jurisdictions in terms of policy collaboration. I hope we were able to implement all the proposals made by members earlier this morning. So I'd like to thank, in closing, all the three officials, Philip, Rosanna, and Eddie, for attending our meeting this morning. At the appropriate time, we will invite you to give us the latest update. Thank you. Next, we move on to the next agenda item, which is the proposed revision of the operation area permit fee of the public cargo working area. That is amendment to Cap 81A. We now invite the officials to join us. Joining us for our meeting today, we have Mr. Chung Siu Man, the Assistant Director of Planning and Services of the Marine Department, Chen Chuk Sung, Chief Assistant Secretary, and also Mr. Fong Kwai Wing. If I may start with Mr. Chen, could you walk us through the paper first? Thank you. We've come this morning to brief members on the proposal regarding the public cargo working areas. I think the policy should be that we should adopt a cost recovery approach. We are now proposing to increase the operating area permit fee of the PCWA, and the fees had not been adjusted since 1999. Based on the cumulative price changes over the last decade or so, we're now proposing to increase the fee by 10%. That is, for every square meter, the fees will be increased by $1 per square meter per month. We understand, we've taken aboard the views of the operator. We have proposed to increase the fees in two phases, 50 cents each. This proposal is the outcome of our consultation with the trade. During the first round of consultation, we received 4 objections, and therefore we propose to divide the increase in split increase in 2 phases. That is, the fee will be increased by 50 cents per stage, and further consultation with the trade resulted in no objection. We are now proposing to amend Section 81A, that is item 16 of the schedule for the port control cargo working areas regulations, and the fee will be amended as from the 1st of February 2015. We will be amended from $10 to $10.50, and to be further amended to $10.50 to $11 on August 1st, 2015. In terms of the timetable, after we've consulted this panel, we intend to we'll gazette the proposal in the Gazette in December this year, and we are now this increase the operating cost of the operators. But I think this will be about there will be about a 0.9% increase in the cost of the operators. Basically, is the berthing fees and also the rent pay for the operating areas. Question time. Any questions? Mr. Yu Siwing. Thank you. When you consulted the trade, you received 4 objections to your proposal to increase the fees. What were the main arguments regarding the proposed scale of increase? Did you make that decision after you've heard from the trade, or was it a counter proposal after you've consulted the industry? Thank you for the question. During the first round of consultation with the trade, their objection was that this would add to their operating costs and making it difficult for them to operate their business, but they did not put forward any specific figures. After liaising with them further, we have adjusted the proposal and changed it into a 2-phase approach. The industry understands that the fee was already fixed in 1999 and it had never been amended since, and they understand that this is the fact that the fee had not been adjusted for many years. After we put forward the 2-phase proposal, they say that they understand that they've taken on board their views, and they put forward no further objections. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Before 1999, when was the last time that the fee was adjusted, and by how much was the fee adjusted? Thank you. I think the license fee was only set in 1999. As for what the fees were before 1999, I think we had a reform for the cargo working areas, and the berthing area were actually leased out by way of tender. Before that, the government department will operate these areas on a first-come, first-served basis. So in those days, there were all kinds of miscellaneous fees and charges. So to answer a member's question, we did not have the operating area permit fee. It was only after the reform of the cargo working area, public cargo area, that we set the fees in 1999, and it has not been adjusted since. I think regarding our fees now, the fees that we now charge, is it typical of all ports that they charge such areas? And after the proposed adjustments, how do we compare with the fees charged in the other areas? The public cargo working area facility is rather unique to Hong Kong. Its predecessor was certain, seafront areas where operators would load and unload the cargoes. It wasn't regulated at that time, and certain problems arose. The government, I think, back in the 1970s, designated these public cargo working areas. So we cannot, really directly compare ourselves with other jurisdictions. The proposed fee is based on the standard procedure for government facilities. That is, we're working on a basis of cost recovery. So in other words, this is unique to Hong Kong. There is no international standard. No, Chairman. Mr. Hick-Shiming. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the fee, people from the industry certainly have many views. Some of them think that you shouldn't charge a fee in the first place. Some would say that you haven't adjusted the fee for a long time, and you're willing to take on board their proposal to adjust the fee in 2 phases, so they accept it. I'm worried that the government is now saying that you are now following the principle of cost recovery. And I'm concerned that you also have included, a specified rate of return. Well, what is meant by I'm worried that the cost recovery could be dangerous.
Is the present operation most cost-effective? The industry would, of course, have different views. I understand that the Marine Department is conducting a comprehensive review. I heard that it would be completed by the end of this year. I don't know the latest progress. I understand that the review would cover the overall mode of management. Would that be changed so as to lower costs such that the fee could continuously be lowered? And then the industry has been talking for 10 odd years that you should consider the car parking fee to be calculated on a half-hourly basis. I personally went there to have a look because that is the best arrangement to allow the vehicles to leave the area as quickly as possible. Because if you have a longer basic unit, they may stay there for longer, the drivers may stay there to have a cup of coffee, etc. You know, the area is actually quite narrow. So in this review, I'd like the government to seriously consider that, and that will benefit the overall operation. Mr. Chong, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Yik, for his question. Concerning the management review for the PCWA, we would consider the agreement that would expire in 2016. So it is opportune to have a review now. That is, upon the expiry of the agreement, how should we operate this PCWA? We'll, of course, consider the various aspects mentioned by Mr. Yik. In terms of management, are there better ways of managing the PCWAs, including the delineation of the fee structure? We should also reduce costs as far as possible so as to enhance the efficiency of the PCWAs. The review should be completed early next year, and then we'll consult the industry. After listening to the final views of the industry on the future management of the PCWAs, including possible changes in the fee structure, we would come back to this panel on economic development before we finalize our decision. Well, Mr. Yik proposed a half-hourly fee structure. You don't need to wait till the review to be completed. Can you go back and consider that and implement that as early as possible? Well, Mr. Chairman, I understand that the revenue of the PCWA may be affected if they adopt a half-hourly basis, because for hourly rates they can earn more. And that's precisely why the industry is opposing the existing policy. That is, they shouldn't calculate the rate of return. If you build a road, you don't need to calculate the rate of return. And Mr. Chong, I'd like you to consider outsourcing the management work. I don't see why you need a few marine officers to manage and operate the PCWAs. So if you can outsource the management work, you can reduce costs. Mr. Chong, Mr. Chairman will consider those directions proposed by Mr. Yik. Last time, the PCWAs changed their mode of operation. After that, we were already heading towards that direction. Some services had already been outsourced. The number of our colleagues has been reduced, and costs have been decreasing. So concerning future developments as well as timetable, we'll conduct a detailed study under our review. Are there any further comments? If not, I'd like to ask members whether or not they support the amendment proposal submitted to us today by the administration. So you all agree. You all support the proposal. So thank you very much, the three officials, for attending today's meeting. Next item on the agenda, any other business? Members, any other business to raise? If not, meeting adjourned. Our next meeting will be held on the 24th of November. Thank you.